Welcome to Small Talk, where each week we sit down to discuss the sermon-based small group questions at Wallula Christian Church.
Welcome back to Small Talk, Wallula's podcast, weekly podcast. I am joined today by Craig and Lance. My name is Zach, and we are so glad that you are here with us today. We are continuing on in the series of Revelation. We are in chapter number 11, the two witnesses and the seventh trumpet, and a lot of stuff to unpack there. And just like always, we're going to start with sort of a fun question, and I'm going to start with Lance on this one. And the question goes like this: that, you know, talking about the idea of teams, that we've all been involved with a team of some sort, whether it be sports or non-sporty, maybe band or just family in general. Yep. But what has been your favorite team to be a part of? You know, and why? And then also, have you ever been part of a team that you didn't want to be a part of? So favorite, least favorite.
Right. Well, the right answer is my favorite team to be a part of is Wallula.
That never even crossed my mind when I answered this question.
Good grief. No. That's my favorite team of all.
Oh, man. Oops.
Yeah.
I'm going to rewrite this stuff.
Rethink this quickly. Answer your marriage.
Oh,
now add that one.
I need to rewrite it again.
Yeah, I'll put that in there.
Yikes! Oh man, I was way off.
Yeah, I grew up being parts of teams. You know, playing. I played baseball when I was a kid, and flag football when I was a kid. That sort of thing, and all those teams. Love doing that, and so I'm in church. Truly, I see. You know, I refer to the church often as, you know, God's team. I see it as a team, you know, that sort of thing. And so that's kind of my view. So I love being part of Wallula. I love being part of his team, just teams in general. You know, I coached my kids' sports teams when they were little, and I got involved coaching when the kids were little, their soccer teams. I coached Lacey's soccer team, and I'm not sure how that happened because I don't know if you can tell by looking at me, but I'm not a soccer guy. Never played soccer as a kid, didn't do that. It's my least favorite sport, you know, to watch, I think.
Did your kids know this when you were coaching them?
Oh, yeah.
Clayton played in high school.
Clayton played, yeah. I told him all the time.
I don't want to be here. It's only my unconditional love.
This is my thing. Yeah, no, he knows that. And he'll start talking. He still is a soccer fan. He'll talk about Sporting, Kansas, you know, and I'm just like, I don't know, dude. Whatever. So yeah, but I got involved coaching that, and so I'm Googling, you know, soccer drills and all of those things to try to coach 8-year-olds, you know, kick it that direction, sort of thing. So that was your least favorite? Oh, I mean,
okay.
I enjoyed doing it.
I was waiting to hear, and it was
so weird.
It ended up being one of my favorite things.
Not really.
I totally redeemed now.
Yeah.
No. I love those kids, you
Sure.
know. And the deal with those kids, they're involved with all the other things, and so it's fun to watch them. Now I'm old, it's fun to watch them grow up and all those sorts of deals. But
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That is true. Man, I've so many things. Yeah, I forgot about that. I was the same way with soccer. I was pleasantly surprised how much I enjoyed it. Tim Vandal, shout out to Tim. We coached with no experience, and we were fine. It was the experience was actually the kids playing was fine, but how much I enjoyed coaching and with that same team, 2 different seasons, was really fun. But that's not what I put down. What I put down was camp teams, and if you haven't been to a Bible college, you may not know, but at Ozark Christian College in Manhattan, a lot of these, and I actually grew up seeing them all the time, but they had these Christian colleges will send teams, usually 2 guys, 2 girls, and they just go to a camp and serve the camp, do whatever they want, and then they, in the process, advertise for their school, and then the next week they leave and go somewhere else, and that's it. So I did that for a couple of summers, and especially the first one. But you're stuck with each other for ours was 9 straight weeks of a different camp. So if you ever go to a camp and you're like, man, I'm exhausted, I can't wait to go home,
Right.
and then you pretty much sleep one night and then go to another camp and you do that 9 times. So we hit a wall at week 3, and where we had a sort of a come to Jesus moment where we're like, we can't function this way with like little bickering, whatever. And then we kind of just got everything out. If that makes sense.
I just want to add here that that's a third of the way through,
Yeah, that's,
which is like 3.
Oh, I know.
Which is
Well, what I'm saying is.
anyway.
Yeah.
Go on.
No, but the point was, after forcing us to get through the pleasantries and we'll be fine, and then you're like, okay, we're not fine, and we had to like really like lay out some rules and talk to each other
Right.
and be honest. It was actually like really freeing, and we were a lot closer and just more like a family, and we had each other's backs. It was just fun after
Right.
that. But anyway, but even the second time I did it, it was kind of the same deal where you're just around each other. It's all you got. Anyway, the thing that you'd mentioned this earlier, and I was like, I did put that. The thing that you didn't want to be a part of. So here's the deal. I'll say this quickly. I was involved with handbells in college. It's you have them on your shoulder and you ding ding whatever. And so
I highly recommend watching the video just to watch that right there.
Yeah.
Zach's
You have to,
handbell
like, ding,
technique.
You have to.
You had special gloves.
Oh yeah, the white gloves.
Yeah, special gloves.
And then anyway, the music director at Ozark was like, we need people who can read music but aren't in the choir or anything else. And I was like, I was a band.
Right.
And I was like, something to do. So sure, why not? So I did it, and I thought it was actually kind of fun. And we played at a lot of old churches. I remember that. It was, the older people loved it. But my friends just mocked me so much. And I was like, whatever, I'll do it. I don't even care. I don't care what you think. And then the next year, I was like going to sign up again, and my friends were like, okay, seriously though, it was fine that you did it, but you can't.
Don't go back.
For real, you did it, now you should be done. And I was like, I kind of like that. And they're like, Zach, I'm serious, like as your friend, I'm not making fun anymore. Please don't do this again. And I was like kind of shamed out of it, and so I didn't.
Aww.
I know. So sorry, Rick Rubel, the musical director who wanted me to do it again. I backed out of handbells. Kind of still liked it, but it was my friends were, it's too much for them. So I don't know. It's kind of a sad ending now. But anyway, that's the other thing I got. What about you, Craig?
Well, see, first of all, I'd say my family.
Oh, gee.
Good answer. That's that's the way to go.
I love it.
Shout out to Haley.
Yeah, shout out to Haley. No, but other teams, other organizations, I just think of all the bands that I've been in.
Yeah.
It's been a lot. I probably should have counted and prepped to have a number, because I've just been in so many.
Yeah.
Do you have any good band breakup stories? Maybe this is for another day, but
Oh, yeah, actually.
do you?
Well, so,
yeah.
I mean, it was kind of funny. I can briefly tell this.
Okay.
So this band that I played in college, I've talked about it before. It was the one that I started playing drums in and was not a Christian, and then through hanging out with those guys, became a Christian, and there was a huge part of my story. One time, we were playing in Wichita. I think it was in a Mexican restaurant. Super random gig.
Okay.
I don't know what we were doing.
As you do.
Sure.
Yeah.
But then
It's Taco Tuesday.
we were halfway through our set, and my friend Jake, he's actually a worship pastor down in Gardner now. He just announced that we were no longer going to be a band anymore. And the three of the guys, we're just looking at each other, and I'm like, "Did you know?" No, we didn't know.
We can still be a band without him.
Yeah, we were finding out
He was
while
like, "I'm taking
everyone
the
else
name."
was finding out.
Jake was done.
Did you ask him about it after?
Well, yeah. I mean, we're like, so what's going on?
Yeah.
We're not a band anymore. And then later we, it was like there was a little period of time where we stopped, and then we were like, well, that was kind of fun. Let's do it again. So we got back together.
Did you have a new name at that point?
Yeah, that was Evelyn. That's the CD you have now.
Oh, yeah.
I gave that to you not that long ago.
We have CDs if you would like them. $5.
Actually, I have too many
$4.99?
CDs.
Too many?
I have like a
All
box
right,
of
99 cents.
50 or more at my house. I don't know.
Wow.
No one bought them. That was a problem.
Which brings us to why we broke up the second time.
No, but I really enjoyed. I mean, well, that was part of my answer. Was that played a huge role in just my life in general, in my relationship with God. So that was a big one. And then other ones, like the K-State Marching Band. That was a great time. I think what's cool about that is I was in it for 2 years, but it's a group of 350 or more.
Yeah.
And you all have this one goal, and there's so many moving pieces and things that you do. So I played a very small part in this huge organization, but it was really cool just to see all of that come together every week. Yeah, I think the last part, a team you didn't want to be a part of, it's really random, but my mind went to when I led worship at King Solomon a few years ago. We did the students versus staff dodgeball team. Not my favorite thing. Okay. I didn't want to be on that team.
Just dodgeball in general, or
maybe I guess
trying to go against kids.
I think the thing is, I'm not a very competitive person. You can probably tell that. And some people took that, in my opinion, too seriously.
Yeah. Adults,
and they get real into it.
Yeah.
No kidding.
And I'm just like, I'm done. I don't want any part of this.
Is this a Christian camp?
And yeah, it just went on for a really long time, and I just wanted to get out of there.
Right.
Yeah.
Not my thing.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think I've been in that dodgeball game.
Yeah, I mean that's a reoccurring thing at camp.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, sometimes I have to talk with the students. I'm like, just so you know, what you saw was not what you should be doing.
Yeah, people
like, not for me, but like when you watch it, and you're like, oh, these adults.
It's like I've never seen that side of you.
No,
This is strange.
Like, right.
I don't like that.
Right.
I don't like that. Yeah. Just as a side note, I was thinking like all the teams and stuff I've been a part of, even the ones that were really difficult, have always been the ones that were difficult. We ended up growing closer. Like I look back fondly on that. Like we went to Honduras and in hard situations. When I went taught English in China, and I remember fondly that team just because it was so hard.
Right.
And so I think a lot of times when you go through something together. Anyway.
Yeah.
Just thought of that. But moving on. Speaking of hard things, let's talk about Revelation 11. There was a quote I was looking at. This isn't even the question, but it was we're talking about. It starts off with the two witnesses, and oh man, am I going to miss this already? Where is that quote? Well, maybe I don't have it now. Oh, here we go. It says the interpretation of the two witnesses is hotly contested. And so that was like the opening line for this commentary. And I was like, okay, good. So,
okay, good.
Yeah. So anyway, we're in the middle of this with the two witnesses, and a lot of stuff is happening through there. And one of the things we notice is that as they start prophesying for a period of time, and then they're killed, and then for a few days they're 3.5 days they're killed, and then they come back to life, and then they go up into heaven. And so just some crazy stuff going on there. But we have this idea, this imagery of like a rapture where they actually go up into heaven, and so even though when people think about the rapture, it's not specifically tied to chapter 11, the rapture itself we see a lot. When you think of Revelation, people talk about that, and there's a lot of different, hotly contested, right, kind of ideas about that. And so, verse number 8 in the questions we're asking is, what do you know about the idea of a rapture? And according to Scripture, what can you know about the rapture, and why do you think the idea is so popular, and is there any problems with that teaching? And so I'm going to go first, because I think my answer may be one of the shortest in this, because I was like, what do I know about it? Like, what did I learn from it? And I wrote, my whole list was the Left Behind series that I read started reading that, and I read all 20. Like, I read the entire thing, not because I was like, this is what I hold to. I just thought it was kind of fun reading. Even after I realized it's probably not the view I would hold, I was like, got to finish the series.
Right.
So I'm a sucker for just not stopping until, with the book series or whatever. But also,
you know how many there were?
20 to 21.
21 books?
I think so. The glorious appearing. I remember after Jesus came back at the very end, I was like, I guess this is done. And then they're like, next book's coming out. And it was like, the weird part was it was like Jesus actually talking now. And I'm like,
Right.
we're actually giving Jesus.
Oh, no.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and this is what it's going to be like when we're in heaven. And then Jesus comes up and say
Yeah.
whatever. And I was like, this is really weird now.
Right.
Now we're just like, let's write a story about us in heaven
Right.
and how these characters. Yeah. Anyway, so the Left Behind series, DC Talk. I remember that song. I wish we'd all been ready. And that was about it. I say that's it. I mean, and I think the people I knew, everyone just assumed, just in casual conversation, like you talk about the rapture, the end times,
Right.
one and the same. And so that was like my whole theology was like, that's it. And I remember even when I first heard another idea, I didn't even know there was another idea. Like I thought it was just, that's exactly like this is how it's going to be.
Right.
Literally. And it was in college. It wasn't even in a class. Just someone said like, what? Like, there's other theories, not theories, but yeah, interpretations of this. And I was like, what? And it just kind of almost shook me. Like, I didn't know there was anything else other than kind of what I assumed there was. And I feel like when I hear people talk about, this is my, like, I'm not even going to give a specific answer to this of like, what do we know about it and all this stuff, but why is it so popular? It just seems like end times in general seems to be really popular, and the rapture is tied into that because what we see is through the trumpets and through the scrolls of like, oh, there's going to be this sort of destruction of things, wars and so we're always surrounded by that. And so there's this idea of like, is this it? Are we in it now? I bet we are. And then when things get bad, then people look to like, well, maybe this is it. So the end time seems to be here upon us. And so I always get wary of people who are like, Revelation doesn't really matter. Who knows? And I'm like, well, I think it does matter. But then I also get wary of people who are constantly
Right.
I mean, they will bring up end times, Revelation, Rapture in everything. And
Revelation guy can kind of be like dodgeball guy.
that's right. And he's just
true.
like, this isn't fun anymore.
It's like, I live for this.
I know.
Right.
I'm like, oh man. I remember one time I was on a plane and I mentioned to the people sitting next to me I was a pastor, and the rest of the time was there. It was just like Daniel and Isaiah and Revelation and the nation of Israel, and I was just like, man, you guys have thought so much about this.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know, like and so that's kind of my answer is like, why is it so popular? I think because of the world that we're in, but the problems with it is sometimes it could either be polarizing and we focus too much or not enough. And so I'm more interested in Lance, I know you've done more research on this, particularly for this sermon. So I'm going to step back and let Craig go next, and then Lance, you can go after about sort of your thoughts on the Rapture, and what you.
Yeah. I'm kind of in a similar boat, and I wanted to say something that you were talking about, like why is it so popular? And I think part of it is, as you were saying, you get to the seals and the trumpets and all that stuff, and then you think about the rapture, and it can kind of be like a comforting thing. It's like, well, if that's going to happen, then all of that's avoided.
I don't have to deal with it.
And then we're in the presence of Jesus, and everything is okay. So I think part of it is maybe people hear that message, and then they're just like, oh, I like that. And so you want to kind of hold on tight to that maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't know a lot about all of the end time views a few years ago. And so when I was going to school at Liberty, I took a class on eschatology, and in general, my class, like Liberty has Baptist roots, but I didn't feel like many of my classes really at all really drove home a lot of that stuff or focused on it, except for that class. A big portion of the beginning of that class was really focused on rapture and premillennial type stuff. So, and a big focus on how Israel is played into that.
Right.
And I had to write a paper that was kind of just what's an overview of all that belief. And so it was interesting to dive really deep into that, but it was also an 8-week course. And so it was a lot of information all at once that I had to try to digest and put a paper out. But but I guess
which you'll read now.
I was gonna say, what'd you get on that paper? Yeah, how'd you do on that?
I did okay. Still got an A in the class, but yeah, I guess some of my general things when it comes to thinking about the rapture, and we've talked about this before, kind of before we started Revelation in staff meeting, but just the the coming of Christ is going to be an event.
Right.
And there's no way that we're not going to know about it.
Right.
And so you think of Jesus' return, his reigning on earth, it's all one singular event.
Right.
And when you start talking about the rapture, maybe it's not explicitly said, but he's going to come,
Right.
and then he's going to leave, I guess, and then
Right.
come back. And so that's
Yeah.
the part where I get really tripped up on that. And some of the language too, we talk about Jesus's forever reign on earth, and so that kind of gets confusing for me too when you
Right.
try to pair that with the rapture. Because even in this passage in Revelation, it's still that vision of new heaven and new earth, and he's coming to reign, and it's not
Right.
the second coming, and then there's a third. It's
Right.
like I
Right.
said, all one event. And I don't know if you want to follow up on on this, Lance, but I was looking at just a little bit on 1 Thessalonians 4:15 through 17, which is another big piece of
Right.
that idea of the rapture and the language that people get when they talk about it. And one of the study Bibles that I read brought up the question, like, is this passage meant to predict the end times or predict a second coming? Or really is Paul trying to comfort the readers and encourage them? And so, like, we really have to think about the context of what we're reading,
Right.
the purpose of it, because the church that he was writing to, I looked it up a little bit. I mean, they had people in their congregation that had died,
Right.
and so they were wondering, like, well,
Right.
if Jesus returns, what is going to happen?
Yeah.
So is Paul responding to that in a
Right.
way to encourage and provide,
Right.
like, okay, so there's still hope with
Right.
Jesus' second coming. And so
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to follow up on any of that, but those are my initial thoughts
Yeah.
when it comes to rapture conversation.
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting, and I think what I want to say first is maybe I need to backtrack a little bit. I haven't gone back and listened to my message from Sunday, and I usually do that at some point. I haven't done it yet, but I think I said that the Bible doesn't teach a rapture, and what I meant when I say that, because I think we talk about the rapture and we mean something that we mean a secret rapture, or we mean, when you talk about the rapture, there's really four ways to think about it, right? There's a pre-tribulation rapture, there's a mid-tribulation rapture, there's a pre-wrath rapture, which is that separates out. Pre-wrath is really you've gone through 3/4 of the tribulation, and then the church is raptured out. So it reads all those things from Revelation 4 to Revelation 16 that we've been studying. We're obviously only to Revelation 11, but it takes the seals and the trumpets and then the bowls. You end up in Revelation 16 with those series of judgments chronologically. And so you get through the seals and you get through the trumpets, and then just before the bowls, those judgments, that wrath of God is unleashed, then the rapture of the church occurs.
Okay.
Or a post-tribulation rapture, which I think the Bible teaches, and I think that's what I said. At least that's what I was trying to communicate Sunday, because certainly there's going to be a time when we are in the presence of Jesus, right? Jesus returns, and we are caught up, whatever that looks like and whatever that means exactly, with Him in heaven, all believers, right? The church, and so but that's when Jesus returns. And Craig, I think you hit the nail on the head. One of the big issues with a pre-tribulation, kind of premillennial, I know we're throwing a lot of terms that
Yeah.
don't, dispensationalist view of this stuff, the Left Behind books. That's where they're coming from. And one of the biggest issues I have with that is things that I don't understand. Well, how does Jesus come a second time?
Right.
You add, Jesus has to come in secret to catch his church up, right, in the clouds, to rapture his church, and then he comes again in judgment. And I really just struggle in Scripture trying to figure that out. And so even some of the references that the Bible uses, you mentioned, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 to 18. You asked, hey, are they talking about, is Paul trying to teach about the second coming, or is he trying to comfort the church in Thessalonica? And I guess my answer would be yes.
Yeah.
Right? That is the comfort, is that Jesus is coming back. And but we read all of that, and it's just, we get to verse 17, then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will always be with the Lord. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. And so there's hope that even as we struggle, even as our loved ones die, that we'll be together again with Jesus, in the presence of Jesus. And so you get this image of being caught up together in the clouds, and I think I mentioned it maybe only at 10:30. I don't remember, but talked about this is the language used for rushing out to meet somebody, and especially it's like if there was a government official or a general riding into town after victory, right? And so you would rush into the streets to greet them, and even before they get into the city. And then what do you do when you greet that general outside of the city because you're so excited about the victory? Well, you march into town with them, right? That's where you celebrate the victory. And the image that Paul is writing here and teaching here is that, we're Jesus is returning, so we're caught up with him, we're excited that he's returning, and then we that continue to where we're going to spend eternity with him. And that's the new heaven and the new earth. And so we return. It's not even that we're raptured into heaven. It's that we meet Jesus and we spend eternity in his presence. And so that's interesting to me. I think that you can, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 teaches a rapture of sorts. It's just, there's nowhere that you get, before anything bad happens, sort of idea. I guess I would say this about that this about a pre-tribulation rapture, that I understand why this is so attractive, right? You read Scripture and, there's this hurt and turmoil and judgment, and you'll hear people say things like, God never intends that for his church.
It's like all of human history. The church has gone through what,
right? Except that's what those 7 churches were living through.
Right.
That John is writing to in Revelation. Except that's what Paul experienced. As he was persecuted. Yes, God does not intend his church for his wrath. I think we misconstrue one of the problems I have with my own theology here. One of the issues, if I was going to say, okay, there's an issue with this idea that we are living in the tribulation right now. That the hurt and the brokenness of the world is we're living through some of those things. Believers around the world, not necessarily you specifically, but we're living in that tribulation period right now. If there's one thing that really, answer me this, Lance, how do you figure this out, that is a problem, it would be maybe that minimizes God's wrath. Maybe that sells short his judgment, his power, his might, even his anger, his wrath. And you should be really careful, when you're talking about a holy, righteous, perfect creator, sustainer, redeemer God. he is not a God you want to sell short. And so, I can, as I think that through though, I think, accept that he's rescued his church from an eternity separated from his presence, an eternity in hell, right? That is the wrath of God. The wrath of God is being separated from him because we refuse to acknowledge him, because we refuse to submit to him, because we refuse to say yes to his son Jesus. And so I think God does rescue his church from his wrath. It's just on that judgment day.
Right.
It's on that judgment day. And I think that the pre-tribulation rapture idea and why it's so appealing to us, it's almost like we, as conservative, don't take that. That's not a political statement. It's almost hard to use language, like that. It's not a political statement, but as sort of conservative, Bible-believing, maybe that's a little better, Bible-believing Christians, we would tend to frown on theologies like, the prosperity gospel. We would say, well, there's no, of course, God doesn't intend only health and wealth for your life. Right. That just can't be when you look at believers, especially around the world. They're folks who are just decimated by poverty, who are followers of Jesus. Well, how do you make sense of that? You guys are starting to plan another Honduras missions trip, and you see that kind of poverty in places around the world with folks who are saying yes and following Jesus. So he can't just mean health and wealth for his followers. And you almost take that and you sort of apply it to eschatology, and that's where you decide, oh no, he's got to get us out of here, before anything really bad happens. He's got to rescue us, and it just doesn't fit with the rest of the New Testament. It just doesn't fit with Jesus, who says, "Get ready to carry that cross, son." It just doesn't make sense with the rest of the New Testament, and not to mention that, when you look at, if you want to overcomplicate something, then you want to grab hold of pre-tribulation, premillennial dispensationalism. Because, that's when you've got to have a series of like 47 events for Jesus to get back. And I'm just not so sure that's what we ought to be carrying away from the book of Revelation.
Right.
That there is one time Jesus is going to return. And that one judgment day, that one great day of the Lord. So, so much more we can talk about with the rapture. Well, I don't know if we need to go on. That's sort of, I've rambled enough and covered enough. So
I thought it was interesting during your sermon, because not knowing a lot and being pretty, I realized I was pretty shallow belief from myself. But when you had brought up how new it was, it's only, like you said, it was 1800s.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it started. Before that was not a belief in the church or church history. That whole view, and I was like, oh wow, because it seems to be so prevalent. Like right now, just taking hold in culture and everything else. Right. So
yeah.
Well, it caught fire in the United States with guys like D.L. Moody, and then the Scofield Study Bible, which is really the late 1800s. I think that came out in 1909 or something like that. So, but people really, it's a relatively new idea. Yeah.
Well. All right. Well, moving on, we're going to look at question number 9 and kind of 10. But it says that the seventh trumpet sounds in chapter 11, verse 15. And once more, John sees a picture of heaven. how would you describe the impact of the seventh trumpet? We're finally there. It's taken us a while between the sixth and the seventh. And it says also look at, verse 18 especially, and kind of the difference of views between chapter 11 and chapter 4 when it comes to the worship of God. And also, at the very beginning of Revelation, it says that it tells us to keep what is written in this book, right? And the one who does that will be blessed. And so when you're looking at something like 11, where there's a lot of differing views and big ideas, what are we supposed to keep from this chapter? Like what would stand out that you can sort of big picture take away from it? Craig, do you want to go first on that?
Yeah. That when the seventh trumpet sounds, we get, like Zach said, that picture of heaven again, and some similar descriptions that we saw in 4 and 5. The 24 elders are mentioned again, sitting on their thrones and falling on their faces and worshiping. And then in 17 it says, "We give thanks to you, Lord God Almighty, who is and who was." And if you compare that to Revelation 4 and 8, it says, "Who was and is to come." And so this is a picture of he has come, he has returned. Mm-hmm. And so that's a little bit difference there in the timing, I guess. But again, another picture of eternity. But like you said, for the question of at the beginning of Revelation, when it says keep what is written. So I've been thinking about what is the kind of the big takeaway from this, and what is maybe a point of application for us from 11. And so I've been really thinking about the two witnesses that are mentioned, and in this vision that John has, I've been looking at the actions of the two witnesses, and really it's they remained faithful. They continued to be faithful. When in verse 7 says the beast rose from the bottomless pit to make war on them and conquer and kill them, we see their dead bodies were laying for 3.5 days, but then God breathed life back into them.
Right.
And then they get to experience eternity, heaven, what we see at the end of chapter 11 with the seventh trumpet. And so I've been thinking about that. Like really this is what I gained from it is an encouragement to remain faithful. And we see the end result, even though they are on the receiving end of evil, the beast that comes out of the bottomless pit. God's promises still are fulfilled.
Right.
And we look to at the end of that section, so verse 13 still talked about 7,000 people were killed in an earthquake, and the rest were terrified and gave glory to God in heaven. And so it's interesting, all of this through the seals and the trumpets, all of these things happened, and judgment came upon the earth. And then really we see these two witnesses remaining faithful, and there were still others that were able to see that.
Right.
And so that is an encouragement to me. You see this big picture of the church remaining faithful and receiving the reward in heaven, being in eternity. No more pain, no more hurt, no more disease, anything. And so whatever we experience on earth, it's temporary. And like I said, God is still going to fulfill his promise of being in eternity, making everything new again, and being able to worship in his presence. And so that's my big takeaway is just remaining faithful, and and God's going to come through.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And maybe I should have gone first because I feel like some of my answers were a little bit the same. But as I was looking at, after the seventh trumpet, which is once again, just sort of detour from the first 6 of, it ends with, instead of destruction and everything else that God is doing, it ends, once again, we're back in heaven and they're worshiping. And we've seen this before, except that one of the big things that stands out is the who was and is to come. I've heard that so many times, especially in worship music. And then here, I didn't even pick it up until Lance had asked the question. And he goes, did you notice the difference? And instead of saying who was and is to come, and it says who we give thanks to you, Lord God Almighty, the one who is and who was, and that's it. And so you're like, wait, and like I said, I didn't even pick up on that, and then I started thinking about, well, what does that mean? Really, besides just practically, okay, well, we're at the end, but that. Well, let me read some of the things I wrote. Is that there is no more future for God after that. No more future for us. It's not like, here's what else I have planned for you. Like since the beginning of time, God has had this plan. And now when we get to this part in the 7th trumpet, whenever that may be for us, it will be completed and fulfilled for us and for God. That his full power has been in effect. He will now be reigning eternally, and his kingdom will have arrived. And so that's what the present will be for us. We'll just think of who is and who was, and there's no more to come. It's just forever us with God. And so when I was thinking about big picture, also with the 2 witnesses, is that I'm just constantly humbled when I read through Revelation and thinking about his sovereignty, that for all the chaos that we see, now and also in the end times, that he still is in control, and that there is a plan, even in this chaos that we're living in, that God still has a plan. And I always think about, like, when I'm working, we're in the youth room, I'm pointing to no one, when students are like, well, I think this and I think this, I'm like, okay, well then let's just do big picture here. What can we agree on? What do you think, even if it's different Christians or different denominations, like if these are 2 actual people who will be here, or this is representative of faithful Christians or the church, like once again, looking at the sovereignty of God, and like you said, whatever happens, God will still raise them up, right? And that he has a plan for those who are faithful, that we have a hope even when times are hard, that no matter how hard it gets, even to the point of death, man, we still celebrate, which is I think the one thing that the rest of the world just can't understand. That one day even in death, even if we do die, we will still worship and praise God one day. I was thinking there's going to be an end. There no more is to come. There will be an end at some point. And there will be a time that when all there is just us with Jesus, right? With God, and that is it. So all these things are coming through my mind, and I find myself just saying the same answers over and over, like whenever I'm thinking about Revelation, because I know I've given this answer before. Like the sovereignty of God is very humbling, but even in all of the I keep saying chaos, like it's more than just that, but the trumpets and the scrolls being opened, death and destruction, God is still in control. Christians are still have a hope even in that. And so that's sort of my idea of sort of my big ideas from that, the big takeaway. I think so many times we look at individual chapters or verses and we get lost in that, which I think is good to do, but also taking a step back and seeing, like, what is the big thing that we need to be remembering in all this. And so that's why I don't I've been convicted a little bit as we've gone through this, like when you're throughout these past few weeks of answering questions, and I'm like, I don't know much about Revelation as I should. I to be honest, I should have known more. Not that I should know it all, but I should have put in the work a long time ago. But at the same time, I think I'm comforted by the fact that even in all the different belief systems around Revelation, the big overarching picture is that God is in control, that Jesus will one day return, and evil will be conquered. And so I think I've allowed myself to rest on that. But Anyway, so I've enjoyed the whole series. I've enjoyed being wrestling with this, not knowing, still, being in that area of limbo. But I'm still comforted by the fact that, hey, even if we disagree, we're still in agreement on who wins at the end and how we get there.
Right. I love those answers. I love, the takeaway of the two witnesses as the church and the resiliency of the church, and the fact that God is, his team wins in the end, and he's going to. We talked briefly before this about another megachurch pastor who got into trouble, and when those things happen in the church, and it just seems like, I don't know, maybe it's true or maybe it's not true, but it seems like that is occurring more and more. And it just, you read one more story and it's like, oh no. And, and this last guy is, somebody we all kind of, you wouldn't have thought that sort of thing. And couldn't have guessed that. And, one more hit, one more belly punch for the church. And, chapter 11 teaches us that the church is going to take those kinds of hits. Sometimes these are self-inflicted sort of things, seemingly. Just again, that spiritual battle that's going on. But the church is still the bride of Christ. And the church is still going to be, these two witnesses, this witness for Jesus. It's still going to be, what leads the world to know him more, and God's going to use it in that way, and Jesus is going to win the day, like you said, Zach. I love that you said, I've given this answer before, and I feel the same way, except that's sort of what Revelation is. Literally over the next couple of weeks, chapter 11, chapter 12, and chapter 13, seeing the unseen. We're looking through different windows. You described it that way on Sunday, Craig. And really these three chapters are telling the same story from a different viewpoint. And then it changes a little bit in the next few chapters we'll study in this series, but we're just repeating the same story. And it's so great to me that story is so simple. that there is a God who loves us, and created us, and even though we wander away, he's made a way for us to be reunited with him through his Son, and when we say yes to him, we get to be a part of his team. And even though that team takes some losses, we get battered and we get beat and we get ruled on occasion, that Jesus is coming back and he's going to win the day. And it's, it's that simple of a story. Now there's lots of different pieces and parts, I suppose, in Revelation that can kind of be confusing and whatever, but it's a simple story. There's just no reason for the church to fight about it or to argue about, when you can agree on those things, like you said, Zach, that Jesus is God's Son, that when we say yes to him, we're a part of his team and a part of his family, and we can pull in the same direction there. There's no reason to fight about the things that are the secrets of God, and the mysteries of God.
Truly,
that we maybe aren't going to figure out.
Yeah.
So.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm encouraged to learn more and grow more in it, and also quick to say, I don't know. I tell the students a lot when it comes to stuff like this, we may get to heaven and be like, no, I was totally off. And that's okay too, as long as we're still ending up in the same place. But so either way, I'm enjoying the journey and with fellow believers. But thank you guys so much. We're getting into it, and so I appreciate going on this journey with you guys. We will see you guys and everyone else out in the podcast sphere next week. And we hope to see you then. Bye.
See ya. Thanks.